Hi, Ping. So good to have you here at the 12th Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum. We are really sad that you couldn't make it in person to the forum, but truly, truly grateful and appreciate your time in joining us for the 12th Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum. I would begin by a little bit setting the context on what we are really looking forward to having a conversation at the 12th Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum and how we have come together for the 12th Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum with a shared commitment to explore how integration of nature's value can truly reshape our economic and environmental futures. And as you're aware that this year's focus on the third pole and the Eastern Himalayan region, a region which is teeming with biodiversity and climate resilience, it highlights very critical need for innovative financial systems that recognize and support our natural assets. Having said that, the forum has been a
Mm-hmm.
platform over the past 11 years for cross regional dialogue and linking experience from across Asia, including, in fact, countries like the Philippines. And so we are so happy to have you from there, whose coastal and marine ecosystems also play a vital role in global climate stability. So I would really like to begin by
Mm-hmm.
asking you, how can the valuation of nature be effectively integrated into financial systems in Asia? Just to put a little bit context and considering the diverse ecosystem across Asia, from the Eastern Himalayas, rich mountain landscapes, to in fact Philippines, rich marine biodiversity, how can we truly embed the nature value of these natural resources into our financial frameworks? If you could a little bit highlight on the strategies or the models that can be adopted to ensure that our economies truly reflect, the importance of protecting, or if I may say, investing in nature for long-term sustainability and resilience. If you could highlight a little bit on, or like maybe examples to demonstrate how, nature value has truly driven meaningful impact in Asian economies. Over to you, Ping.
Thank you so much, Karishma, for having me, and congratulations to the Balipara Foundation and co-organizers for the Himalaya Nature Economics Conference that you're hosting. I certainly wish I could be there in person, but I hope that this message gets across just fine for now. If I may just have a context share for um, the important discussion we're having, I'd like to mention how nature and biodiversity underpin and sustain the global economy. Where nature collapses, businesses and economies collapse as well. In the Philippines, where I am from, the country's forests, rivers, oceans, and soil are natural capital that provide vital ecosystem services, and the variety of life that make up ecosystems ensures food security, environmental health, and sustainable development. Unfortunately, because nature is free, it is severely undervalued, exploited, and taken for granted. In the Philippines, for example, we are the number one nation year on year, being exposed to the nature and biodiversity loss and also climate related hazards. Estimates indicate that approximately 19% of the economy is directly linked to natural resources and ecosystems, and this includes sectors such as AFF, or agriculture, fisheries, and forestry, and tourism, who are heavily dependent on healthy ecosystems and biodiversity for their productivity rather, and sustainability. So this means that on the other hand, we have nature, and on one hand, we also have the climate hazards. So we need nature to be able to protect us and shield us from the climate hazards. But at the same time, the climate hazards are damaging nature. So we already know that studies have shown that if the Philippines invests up to 0.5% of its GDP each year from 2020 in climate change adaptation, of which nature-based solutions are a crucial part, the country can avert losses of up to 4% of its GDP by 2100. Clearly, this is a short term investment with a long term eightfold gain. Now, having said that, your question is that how can we valuate natural capital and how can we develop this valuation into ESG frameworks? Now, there are strategies for integrating nature valuation into financial systems. First is develop natural capital accounting. Governments can adopt natural capital accounting frameworks to quantify ecosystem services and incorporate them into national accounting systems. Therefore, policymakers can understand the economic value of ecosystems, and this will facilitate informed decision making. In the case of the Philippines, for example, last September, we were able to pass into law the Natural Capital Accounting and Ecosystem Services Law. So there is going to be a kickstart of how our statistics office would account for nature in partnership with our environment ministry so that we can value nature, not only its direct extraction and direct use, but nature in its entire life cycle. So this is going to impact the way businesses are conducted in the country from here on. Now, the Asian Development Bank is actively developing tools to measure natural capital, which can be integrated into development planning and investment frameworks. For example, the NCV, or Natural Capital Valuation Model, assesses nature related risk and identifies investment opportunities that are beneficial for both the economy and the environment. Another tool is creating financial instruments for nature. As I mentioned, just 2 weeks ago, I was with the United Nations Development Program Philippines, who partnered with Climate Policy Initiative and with support from Government Affairs Canada to launch a global call for nature based solutions with a gender lens, of which one solution will be funded from the Philippines, right? So, financial instruments as well, like green bonds, and biodiversity focused sukuk or Islamic bonds can mobilize private investment in nature positive projects. I'll give you an example about Malaysia's government. It plans to issue a USD 200 million biodiversity sukuk to fund forest restoration and carbon credit initiatives, showcasing how innovative financing can support environmental goals. Now, we want to emphasize what innovative financing is. Innovation is when you're faced with challenges, you think outside of the box to hurdle the challenge. For example, in the Philippines, there is no law about nature-based solutions. There's no
Right.
sukuk Islamic bonds, just such as what Malaysia government established. But you think outside of the box on how to hurdle these policy gaps to be able to create an instrument, a financing instrument that serves nature and at the same time creates inclusive and sustainable economic growth.
I think it just like, we have been hearing a lot about the ESG principles and how increasingly important as we seek to align financial growth and environmental stewardship. It is so important. I think having reflected on ESG and then coming to nature accounting, it also shows how Philippines is adapting and sort of like, bringing in these bonds for the investment sectors as well as for, in the right place where it needs to be. So I think having understanding a little bit about how Philippines is doing or how Malaysia is actually taking it forward, how do you think this frameworks can be actually leveraged to direct investments that not only drive financial returns but also ensure the preservation and enhancement of vital ecosystems? And I mean, how region like the Eastern Himalayas can truly also learn from a place like Philippines, or like for the whole of Asia. So how would you like to answer that? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Karishma. And of course, learning around integrating nature and ESG principles in its evaluation is a two-way or a multi-directional process. I will not say that, the Philippines is already, a good example for it, so that the third pole countries or the third pole region would be able to mirror. There are so many rich lessons that we can be learn as well from the third pole. But ways ESG principles can support nature finance is number one, risk management and mitigation. So when we identify environmental risk through ESG frameworks, it helps investors recognize environmental risks associated with their portfolios, such as biodiversity loss and climate change impacts. We always say that nature should be part of your P&L analysis, right? When we incorporate risk into investment decisions, companies can avoid potential financial losses, enhance long term sustainability. Now, aligned with ESG practices is also encouraging sustainable practices. We must engage with the private sector to adhere to ESG principles and Those that are adhering to ESG principles are more likely to adopt sustainable practices, which can lead to better management of natural resources and reduce environmental degradation. Also, green bonds and financial instruments, as I have mentioned, are on the rise. And other sustainable financing schemes are also being introduced that allow for targeted investments in projects that promote nature conservation. So it is nice that we go beyond, in fact, beyond nature conservation to and gender focused nature based solutions investing. Because as we know, climate change disproportionately impacts the women, the children, the vulnerable sector. So when we create solutions and financing instruments that are focused on gender as well, we achieve two results. All right. So these instruments often attract ESG focused investors as well. PPPs is another one. Public private partnerships. ESG frameworks facilitate collaborations between governments, NGOs, and the private sector, enabling funding for conservation initiatives that might otherwise lack financial support. Right. There are also certain jurisdictions that make it mandatory to report, ESG performance. Just like in our country, by 2025, we will be releasing an updated Securities and Exchange Commission integrated reporting standards for publicly listed companies. So they have to disclose how they impact the environment and how they also extract nature in ways that are more sustainable, more responsible, because it does make business sense. Finally, we could also look at alignment of ESG frameworks with nature conservation goals. It's important for us to define unified taxonomies. Taxonomy is a big word, but it only means a unified language. Without a unified language, we will not know how to evaluate certain things. So, unifying taxonomies is really important, establishing clear definitions of what constitutes sustainable activities and what are the, nature conservation goals. Countries like Singapore are developing comprehensive taxonomies that define green investments, providing clarity for investors and promoting consistencies across the region. There are also government support in Asia that we are increasingly monitoring to adopt regulations that require companies to adhere to ESG standards. For example, China is implementing new sustainability reporting guidelines requiring companies to report on environmental impacts starting in 2026. So, such regulations can create an environment where nature conservation is prioritized with financial systems. This is one of the things that I'm also excited about when we leverage technology for sustainability. For example, the use of technology in ESG investing, such as satellite imagery, AI for monitoring environmental impacts, can enhance the effectiveness of nature finance initiatives. So, innovations like these enable more accurate tracking of sustainability metrics and facilitate better decision making. So, some examples we're seeing across Asia, green bonds have surged, particularly in China and India. These bonds fund projects focused on RE, sustainable agriculture, and biodiversity conservation. Next is sustainable agriculture. As you know, Karishma, agriculture is one of the greatest sources of our emissions, but of course, we need food security at the same time. So in the Philippines, investments in sustainable agriculture driven by ESG considerations have led to improved practices that conserve biodiversity while enhancing food security. So we can see the alignment between financial incentives and environmental goals that can yield positive outcomes for economy and ecosystem. Okay. For example, companies in Singapore as well, particularly those in the palm oil sector, are now prioritizing sustainability disclosures related to emissions management, because this is also there is an increasing stakeholder pressure. You probably already know that there is the EU directive, the Corporate Due Diligence Directive. At the same time, there is also an EU and Asia relationship when it comes to palm oil imports for use in biofuel production as part of EU's emissions reductions that is cross-border, that also applies to cross-border countries with whom they trade. So that is also an aspect that we are seeing increasing pressure, not just within the country's borders, but internationally with trade partners as well. So I would say that integrating ESG principles into nature finance presents a powerful opportunity for Asian economies to promote sustainability while achieving economic growth. Aligning financial frameworks with nature conservation goals through risk management, regulatory support, innovative financial instruments, and corporate accountability can help Asia develop sustainable financial models that benefit both people and the planet.
Thanks a lot, Ping. I think there was so much to learn from you, and the instances and the examples you have cited. I think it gives us also a very, very clear picture of how ESG has been rightly integrated, or if I may say, has been rightly taking the progressive step forward to think about nature and economy, but not just like nature and economy, but overall well-being of the people and the planet. And I'm glad that you really touched about innovations, you touched about gender, you touched about the vulnerable groups, and how together it comes all together for our planet, for our forest, for the entire valuation chain. So thank you so much. I'm really glad we could have the discussion. And I hope together with you, together with EcoBusiness and the Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum and Balipara Foundation, we could truly work on this sector. And and we all know how EcoBusiness has been strongly monitoring these impacts, working for the entire Asia. So we truly hope together in the Eastern Himalayan region, we can take forward these discussions and work together for a sustainable future. Thank you so much,
Thank
Ping.
you so much, Karishma. Have a great conference ahead, and please do
Thank
reach
you.
out for any ways we could further support you. Thank you.
Thank you.